Alaikum salam. How are you, brother? Good. Um, the AC is okay?
AC? You want me to turn it down or up?
No, definitely not down. Like what is it set?
At 73.
73?
Yeah, somebody, whoever sits underneath there is going to complain. Because you're getting directly yeah.
Oh,
I wear kufi to prevent that.
but I think every exterior door in the building is open.
Yeah.
This AC
Yeah.
is just specifically for this area. So it should be okay.
So are you okay if I make?
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you. Do you want to do this after, when there's a larger number of people, or do you want to do it now?
That's probably better to do it after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So before we pray Maghrib, inshallah,
Okay.
just catch me at that moment and.
I'll wink it.
Yes. Yes. All right, guys, assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, we're going to start in just 1 minute. So if you come to your seats, please, I would appreciate that. All right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I begin in the name of Almighty Allah. I invoke His peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I ask Allah to extend His blessings to the prophets and the messengers, their followers, and all the men and women that walk in their footsteps, and I ask Allah to make us among them. Allahumma ameen. Brothers and sisters, Jazakumullah khairan, thank you for joining us for another session of the Tafseerah program. Tafseerah, again, is a combination of tafsir and seerah. Those are two separate words. Tafsir is commentary on the Quran, and seerah is the life and biography of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And since the Quran was revealed over a span of 23 years to address actual events in the Prophet's life, alayhi salatu wasalam, as we study the Quran, and the context in which the Quran was revealed gives us a better idea of the events of the Prophet Muhammad's life and the purposes of the Quranic narrative. And we are still covering Surat Al-Anbiya, literally the prophets. This surah full of wonders, a surah that basically states the objective, the divine objective of sending prophets and messengers, and that is to bring their people out of a state of heedlessness into a state of heedfulness. From yaqadha, from ghafla into yaqadha. And again, the Arabic word for being heedless, not paying attention to the right things, the word that is used is the word ghafla. This person is in a state of ghafla. That means this person is asleep, basically, is refusing to wake up. And the word in Arabic that is used to describe people who are heedful, who pay attention, is the word yaqadha, which also means to be awake, right? And we we basically said that as the prophets and the messengers bring people from this state of heedlessness into a state of heedfulness, they make people basically aware of their vision and mission in life. And I actually wanted to comment on that, a little tidbit here. If you think of a company, for example, or an organization, usually the first thing they do is to define their vision and their mission. Can someone tell me in very simple words, the difference between vision and mission of an organization? What is the vision and what is the mission? In fact, I always say every family needs to have both vision and mission. You don't just come together. You don't need to get married, right? You're not religiously required to get married. You're not socially required to get married. You're not legally required to get married either. Why do we get married? There has to be a reason for which I'm putting a family together, right? So, just to make it easy on you, I know that you guys have passed the age where you're, tolerant of pop quizzes. The vision usually is basically to ask myself, where do I want to be in 10, 15, 20, 30 years? The vision is about the long-term objectives. The vision is about al-ghayat, right? Al-ghaya is the absolute most fundamental purpose, right? Mission, on the other hand, is basically the plans and steps that I plan, the steps that I plan to take in order to reach my vision. A lot of people, most people in fact, have neither mission nor vision. If you ask an ordinary person, what is the vision of your life? What is the mission of your life? It'd be like, oh, I don't know. I just wake up in the morning, I have breakfast, I go to work, I come home, I watch TV, and I sleep. Okay, I don't know. You ask religious people, what is your vision and your mission of your life? Most people don't have that. At the individual level, they certainly don't have that at their family levels. Some people have a vision, but they don't have a mission. So you ask them, what is your vision in this life? They'll use, the things that religious people say. I just here to please God. I'm here to to earn God's salvation, to go to heaven, to go to Jannah, stuff like that. But what is it that you're doing today that in order to help you achieve that? Most people don't have, that. Even in material words, some people, you ask them, what is your vision? Well, I would like to retire at the age of 50 and to be like on a Puerto Rico beach, drinking pina colada. Okay, that's their vision. Okay, retire at the age of 50 and have fun. Okay. For some, that is a vision, but what is your mission? What do you plan to do to have enough income that you don't have to work anymore by the age of 50? Okay, so having that long-term goal, that's your vision. Having a short-term goal that will get you there, that is your mission, right? Okay, very good. So most people have neither. Some people have a vision, but they don't have a mission. It's easy to set goals, but it's not as easy to put the effort that will get you to where you want to be, right? And so think of it this way. Surat Al-Anbiya helps people with a vision have a mission, right? Surah Al-Anbiya tells you need to wake up. Don't just say, I want salvation. Work for salvation. Earn your salvation. Come up with a plan for that salvation. Don't say, I want to become a good Muslim and I want to become a good human being when you're not taking active steps to get there. Don't say, I would like to retire at the age of 50 when you're not really doing anything that will help you retire at the age of 50. Don't say, I would like to be healthy when your diet is horrible, right? What are the steps that you're taking right now in order to get where you need to be? Surah Al-Anbiya was revealed, as I said many times before, about a year before the migration from Mecca to Medina, which was a particularly successful year for Islam in Medina. While the Prophet ﷺ is still in Mecca, but Islam was propagating and spreading, quite successfully and gaining ground in the city of Medina. Some of the themes that we've covered so far, we talked about not accepting the way of our forefathers. In fact, I always say accepting complacency with the way of our forefathers is the absolute most horrific source of heedlessness. Why do you do this? Because my parent do it. Why do you do that? Because my family does it. Why do you practice this? Where it's our culture, it's our family, it's our heritage, it's our way, right? If all people were complacent with the way of their families and their cultures, there will be no new ideas, there will be no new inventions, there will be nothing great happening in the world. The only reason humanity progresses is because someone somewhere goes against the established norms. Wouldn't you agree? Right? No one would have invented anything if we just accept the rules that other people have set. And so it is precisely that people sometimes go against, and I'm not saying that in any egregious sense, but go against the culture and the establishment of your family in order to seek out the truth. Okay? Maybe ultimately you realize that your family was actually right. That's okay. But you've gone through the exercise and you've exerted the effort. And I said that many Muslims, not just non-Muslims or society at large, I'll talk about us. Many Muslims are absolutely complacent in the way of their forefathers. Why do you do what you do? Why are you Shafi'i? Because my parents were Shafi'i. Why are you Shia or why are you Sunni? Because my parents were Sunni. Why do you dress like this? Why do you practice Islam that way? Well, it's just how my family is. As opposed to verifying for yourself what is right and what is wrong and what needs to be done, and so on and so forth, right? So we talked about that, and in the Christian sense, Surat Al-Anbiya addressed the Trinity. The idea, that Christians have this reverence for, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. The one versus three puzzle, so to speak, this conundrum that defies explanation, right? And then, last session we talked about the slaps in the face. Sometimes you need to wake something up from their ghafla, from their heedlessness, by slapping them in the face, right? So it talked about the Big Bang, how the universe was one unit and then it was cleaved asunder. It talked about how water is basically that indispensable source of life. It talked about mountains as pegs, and we talked about how the formation of mountains is the end, the very last step, the concluding step of the process stabilizing the Earth's crust. And we talked about the atmosphere as protection, all examples that are used by the surah itself. How the 5 layers of the atmosphere, serve as protection. And we talked about, I think, 4 or 5 different examples last time as to how the atmosphere actually provides that protection. But then there was another wake-up call that we covered in the surah as well, and that is to talk about the inevitability of death. If none of these things woke you up, then perhaps knowing that one day you have to leave this world might compel you to develop that vision and that mission for your life. We also talked about how civilizations decline, and that God basically comes upon those civilizations, rids those civilizations of their outliers. And the outliers of every civilization are basically its greatest minds. The philosophers, the artists, the thinkers, and so forth. And what is left basically is the dregs of society. Now, in tonight's section, we're going to cover the prophets, the actual prophets, the 16 or 17 of them that are mentioned in this surah. And, as we've talked about the concepts of this surah so far in the abstract, now we talk about those concepts, through the stories of the prophets as examples, and how this is an antidote to heedlessness. So we'll start, inshallah, with ayah number 51, if you guys have your Qur'ans with you. And 51 jumps straight into the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Abraham. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and indeed we have vouchsafed unto Ibrahim his consciousness of what is right, and we are aware of what moved him. We've entrusted Ibrahim with a sound mind, with intellect, God says. And again, we will never run out of time talking about Ibrahim alayhi salam. No, I'm sorry. I meant to say we will always run out of time if we try to talk about Ibrahim alayhi salam. this incredible legend. Ibrahim the patriarch, Ibrahim the prophet, Ibrahim the father of monotheism, Ibrahim the friend of God, Khalilur Rahman, as the Quran characterizes him. Ibrahim is a man that was endowed with great intellect. He's endowed with great intelligence. Not just obedience and devotion, but he's just smart. He was made to be intelligent, right? And we see this manifest itself, throughout the story of his life. At a very young age, he does exactly what Surat Al-Anbiya teaches us to do, to go against the grain, to stand up for what is right, to stand up against what is wrong, even if it means making your family angry sometimes, and you do that respectfully to the best of your ability. Ibrahim alayhi salam at a very young age could not accept the idea that his people make idols with their own hands and then start worshiping them. In fact, they say that his father was the priest at the temple, right? He had every reason to be complacent. He was set to be, the next priest. He was well respected. He is his father's oldest son. Naturally, will become the heir of this incredible kingdom. And he is going to be well respected. And you have to understand, in those ancient times, religious authority was nearly just as powerful as political authority or military authority, right? So he becomes the priest of Iraq, right? Of the Babylonians, would have meant a tremendous amount of wealth, tremendous amount of power, tremendous amount of respect for himself. But he was not interested in any of those things. His goal was the truth. His pursuit was the truth. What do I need to do? Who do I need to worship, right? So he starts having this conversation basically with his father first, with his family, and with his community. And if you look at verse number 52 here, إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ. So he directs his question first to his father as the priest of the temple, and then to his people. إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ مَا هَذِهِ التَّمَثِيلُ الَّتِي أَنْتُمْ لَهَا عَاكِفُونَ. What are these idols? What are these statues that you have devoted yourself to so religiously? Okay? Why are you worshiping things that you made with your own hands? Because it doesn't make sense. In order for me to worship something, I need to make sure that that object has existed before me and will exist after me. That this object is independent of me. I am the one that put this pen right here, and I can take this pen, break it to pieces if I wanted to. How can I worship a pen that another human being has made? Okay? But I know that some of you are thinking, oh, this is just crazy. How did they do that? Like the people of Quraysh and Mecca, how did they worship idols? Some of them, remember the stories that they used to make idols out of dates. So they would get the dates, they would de-pit the dates, remove the pits from the dates, and mix the dates with oils and stuff like that, and grind them into this paste, right? And they would let the paste hardens a little bit, and then they would make like idols out of the the dates, the date paste, okay? And they would literally let it dry completely, okay? And then they would put this coat, this layer of wax on it so that it doesn't go bad, because God forbid, you don't want your God to rot, because dates could rot, right? So they would do that, and they cover it with this protective layer of wax, and then sometimes they'd be so hungry, so they'd break off an arm or something from the idol and eat it. It's no joke. And then when they go home, they would replace the arm with another arm and just gonna stick it there, right? Or maybe you're super hungry and you have guests coming, so you don't have enough time, and you need a snack or something before the lamb cooks. So what do? You cut up the God, basically, into small pieces and serve it. Now you're looking at this and you're like, this is crazy. How is it that people, in ancient times would do such crazy stuff? Is humanity done with idol worshiping? We still do it every single day. We worship things that we've made with our hands every single day. At the end of the day, what is the meaning of worship, really? Philosophers actually say, there's no atheist in this world. Why is it that there's no atheist in this world? Because every single one of us worships something. If we understand worship as commitment, as devotion, as reverence, as respect, as putting something above us, following their rules. If you understand worshiping, not worship in the ritual worship of looking at a God and praying to that God, in this caricature sense like in the movies, not necessarily, right? Any object that you've committed yourself to and you have devoted yourself to completely and you follow that object's interest, sometimes against yours, is an object of your worship. And even someone who calls themselves atheist may, at the end of the day, worship their job, or worship the dollar, or maybe worship their spouse or their lover, and you think that your life is nothing without that person. Isn't that a type of worship? Which would make that person or that object a god for you, right? A lot of people these days worship their phones. How many times did you hear it? My life is ruined without my phone. Like, this is the kind of thing that religious people would say about God. Without God, my life is dark. Without my phone, my life is dark. Doesn't that sound like the same thing? Because you've become so dependent on something, and you put the interest of that object before your own, and you're going to keep buying these nice, fancy cases to protect it, right? Like the wax around around your idol made of dates, right? And you put the screen cover, and you pay money, for insurance every month, right? And you have all this extended warranty stuff, and whatever the phone tells you to do, you do blindly. Isn't that true? Mrs. Google says go right, we all blindly go right. She's your God. I know that this sounds like humor, but ultimately, the more your heart commits itself to something, the more that person or that object becomes like a god to you. That's why shirk is not an ancient concept of the past. Shirk is something that still happens to this day. Some people love football so much that they will give up anything in the world, for the sake of football. And they buy the expensive jerseys, and they'll buy the $2,000 tickets, to watch the game. They'll forego the world on Sundays in order to watch their games. They build a culture around it, right? People love some celebrities so much that those celebrities become like their gods. They have their pictures on the wall, and they follow them everywhere, and they pay money for their memorabilia and stuff like that. They pay so much money for their songs and everything, and then they literally go when there's a concert or something, just so that the celebrity writes their name on their chest with a Sharpie marker. There is something sinisterly religious about all of this. I mean, we may convince ourselves, it's just kids, don't worry about it. But ultimately, that's why I say there's no atheist in this world, because everyone believes in something. Everyone will manufacture a system of thoughts, and they will just commit and devote themselves to that system. All right? And that is the absolute scariest form of ghafla. That's the worst form of this heedlessness. When you commit to something, yourself to something, to an object that does not deserve your attention. So this is what drove Ibrahim crazy. What is wrong with these people? You create something with your own hands and then worship it? At his time, it was these idols. In our time, it's actually a lot more objects that people worship in God's stead. What is the typical response that they would always give him? Look at ayah number 53. It's the absolute most typical response, the oldest response in the book. قالوا وجدنا آباءنا لها عابدين. This is how we found our parents. This is how we found our forefathers. I always struggle with my kids about this. Alhamdulillah, not as much now, but when they were younger, Dad, I want to do this. Why? Because all the kids in class do it. Dad, I would like to buy that. Why? Because all my friends have it. Why do you say these words? Well, everyone else in class says these words. Habibi, why did you get a C? Well, most kids in my class got a C. You parents, you've heard this before, right? This is the most typical response. As if the mere fact that there is a large number of people or some type of critical mass does it, that in and of itself makes the act a good act. Or that because my parents do it, then it has to be good. So, someone calls the landline at home. Most of us don't have landlines anymore, right? But someone calls your house, and then dad says, tell him I'm not here, tell him I'm not here. Ultimately, that is what? It's lying, right? So the son one day has his own family, and then someone calls the house. So he says to his son, tell him I'm not here, tell him I'm not here. So the son says, Dad, but this would be lying. And then the dad says, well, I don't know, my parents used to do the same thing. Is that a good answer? See how silly, how foolish this is when you actually break it down? It becomes so foolish, right? And so what your forefathers used to worship stupid idols? So what? You don't have minds. See the heedlessness? I'm not even going to think about it because my dad, my mom, and my great-grandparents used to do the same thing. I'm not going to think about it. It is what it is. I'm just going to follow in their footsteps, right? It's easy. It requires very little effort, right? But ultimately, it is ghafla. It is heedlessness. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, it says, "Atayna rushdahu." He was granted this intelligence. So he comes up with a plan. He says, I need to demonstrate something to these people because direct conversation with them is not working. Sometimes direct preaching doesn't achieve the intended results. Maybe people will actually become a little bit more defensive, right? So he concocts this plan in order to show them the foolishness of their thoughts and their ideas. So he decided to do what? He decided to sneak into the temple at night when everyone is asleep and to basically break down the idols, most of them at least, into small pieces, right? And then leave the biggest idol in the temple and not touch the biggest idol. So that in the morning, they will likely suspect that Ibrahim is the one that did this. He's like a known critic of their ways, right? So they would bring Ibrahim and they would question him, and then he would say what? I didn't do anything. It was the big boy, right? The big dog. It's the big idol that did that. It was not me, right? So if you look at ayah number 57, وَتَاللَّهِ لَأَكِيدَنَّ أَصْنَامَكُمْ, by God, I will most certainly bring about the downfall of your idols. I'm going to teach you a lesson tonight, right? So he sneaks up to the temple. فَجَعَلَهُمْ جُذَاذًا. He breaks them to small pieces. Al-jadh is to cut something into a small piece. فَجَعَلَهُمْ جُذَاذًا. He then broke those idols to pieces, save the biggest of them. إِلَّا كَبِيرًا لَهُمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ يَرْجِعُونَ. So that they go back to their senses and they think about what's going on. 59. قالوا من فعل هذا بآلهتنا. Who did this to our gods? Of course, they don't say to our idols, right? They said our gods. Who did this to our gods? I mean, do you understand? Can you hear yourself? Do you understand how foolish it is that what you're saying right now? You've just accepted that there's a human being that has the power to destroy a god. That doesn't ring any bell to you? When we took the boys on this camp, a couple of weeks ago, and we didn't tell them anything. We kept it a secret. So when they arrived there, the camp leaders, I wasn't there the first day. I joined them the second day. But the camp leaders, they took a basket and they went around and they asked every kid to put their smartphone in the basket, right? Turn off your phone and put it in the basket. And the kids were like, oh my God, why would we do that? He said the camp rules, otherwise you can leave right now. So all the kids reluctantly turn off their smartphones and they put them, and you know how these kids are, they have backup like concealed phones and in their ankles, right? Your backup phone, bring me that too, right? So the kids take out their phones, turn off the phones and put them in the basket, okay? Every single one of those kids thinks that they are entirely dependent on the phone. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I need to take pictures and I need to post on Instagram and I need to update my status and I need to make a little weird video on TikTok and I need to communicate. The world is going to stop if I'm not using my phone, right? Well, guess what? 48 hours later, what happened? The kids realized that they had the absolute most incredible time of their lives, that they don't need the phone, that they don't depend on this phone, that this phone was just an instrument. It's just an instrument that is supposed to work for me, not the other way around. I'm not enslaved by this object. This object is my slave, not the other way around. This is, by the way, this is my criteria about anything in this material world. Ask yourself, as you start depending on something, does this thing still work for me, or do I work for it? Does it serve my purposes, or I'm serving its purposes, right? When you are, the first thing that comes to your mind is to take a picture and post it on social media. You ask yourself, why am I doing this? I'm not saying don't do it. I am just saying ask yourself, why? Do you have family members overseas that would be happy to see that you are happy? Okay, send it to them on WhatsApp. You need to post it for the world to see? Is there a purpose? Is there a function for you telling the world what you're involved with, or you just do it just cause? And if the answer is, I just do it and I don't know why I'm doing it, then I guarantee it. There's someone out there that is making money off of you, that is using you and sucking your blood. If you cannot identify the commodity that is being bought and sold, then you have to understand that you are the commodity. That's the rule. That's the rule. This is how it is in the world. You know, Gmail is such a powerful platform. Google, they're such charitable people. You know, they're so good. You know, they're allowing me to have email for free. Imagine if we have to pay for email, right? I can just go in there and make an email for free. They're so nice. Are they? It's not about being nice, you know. You are the product that is being bought and sold, because they are tracing your behavior, and all these algorithms are looking at the words that are used in your emails and so forth, and then it personalizes the advertisement, and all market research points in that same direction, that you are more than likely to eventually buy something with this targeting marketing. So instead of AT&T organizing, you know, a $100 million marketing campaign for everyone, no, they'll target this particular age group, you know, white males ages 35 to 47, because they saw in their Gmail a pattern of behavior that will be conducive to them buying this particular product more effectively than any other groups. If you can't identify the product, you are the product, all right? And a Muslim should never allow himself or herself, to be taken advantage of and exploited by somebody else. At least if it happens, do it willingly. Don't let people take advantage of you, right? So that was the plan of Ibrahim alayhi salam. I'm just going to go ahead and break down all of these idols, just so that they are able to face that reality on their own. Just like the kids going to the boys' camp. You know, wait a second. This phone is actually not my God, because I was able to live without it for 2 days, right? If these were gods, they would have not allowed some teenager to break them to pieces, all right? So he says to them, you know, when they asked him, you know, did you do this? أَأَنْتَ فَعَلْتَ هَذَا بِآلِهَتِنَا? Ayah number 62. يا إبراهيم أأنت فعلت هذا بآلهتنا يا إبراهيم? Was it you? Did you do that to our gods? And Ibrahim's response, obviously, you know, nope, it wasn't me. It was him over there. It was the big god, the big idol right there. قال بل فعله كبيرهم هذا. Well, ask them. Maybe if you think I'm lying, ask the god, the idols. Ask the gods, right? فَرَجَعُوا إِلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ فَقَالُوا إِنَّكُمْ أَنْتُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. When they went back to themselves and started talking to each other, and guys, I mean, this is crazy stuff. You know, maybe we're wrong. He's right. If these were true gods, they would have actually protected themselves. But then again, you know, the power of culture, the power of complacency, the power of tradition, the refusal to change your ways and so forth, ultimately prevented those people from accepting the call of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and they decided to stay in their heedlessness, in their ghafla. Because yaqadha, heedfulness, also comes with a cost. You have to change your ways, you have to change your lifestyle, you have to change your diet, you have to change your perspective, you need to live a different, it comes with a cost, right? But any cost is justifiable if it means finding the truth. That's what intelligent people would say. So ayah number 68 basically tells you that they decided to just use fire, the fire of complacency, to put out the light of knowledge and understanding. Okay? We're just going to punish Ibrahim and kill him. Let's just put this problem behind us because Ibrahim is so loud, he's forcing us to think, and we don't want to think. We would rather just be what we are, and we don't want to make any changes, right? قالوا حرقوه وانصروا آلهتكم. Burn him alive. Burn him alive and stand up for your gods in kuntum fa'ilin. So the scholars talk about this a lot. And they, let me see here, inshallah, I want us to interrupt the program, pray Maghrib, and then come back, because the Salat al-Maghrib is now earlier, and I don't want to delay Maghrib until, so 7:45 inshallah we pray Maghrib, and then we get back to the program. So brothers and sisters that are following on the live broadcast, we'll just have to interrupt. We're not going to cut down the feed, so we'll leave the feed inshallah for 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back to it. So it's 7:39, so 6 more minutes inshallah we're going to pray Maghrib. All right? So again, they decided to take the easy way out. Let's just throw Ibrahim in a pit of fire. And Namrud, the Nimrod, the king of Babylon at the time, who was basically involved in all of these dialogues with his own people, kind of, waiting to see what public opinion will eventually determine. Once he realized that the consensus of the priests and all the leaders is to punish Ibrahim, he jumped right in. Just like Pharaoh, remember? When he used to say to the people of Egypt, Da'uni aqtul Musa. He is the Pharaoh, and he could just execute Musa if he wanted to. But he would talk to his advisors and to the leaders of the country, let me execute Musa. In other words, public opinion was still against him, even though he's the tyrant of the country. So Nimrod was the same thing. He's observing from afar. He's waiting for the religious debate at the temple between the priests to adjudicate. And once it did, and he realized that their intent now is to execute Ibrahim, immediately he asked his soldiers to build, this massive pit of fire. And he filled it up with like a forest worth of logs, right? They actually say that when they lit it up, even birds could not fly over it because they would literally just barbecue and die. So, it killed everything within like a half-mile radius. It was such an overkill that they struggled. How do we even bring Ibrahim and throw him in the pit in the first place? Okay, now we've created this really massive fire. How are we going to throw this guy in that fire? So they ended up designing a catapult. And the catapult, like in the movies, like the Lord of the Rings, right? So they designed this catapult, and they placed Ibrahim alayhi salam in the cup of the catapult, and then they released. Okay, so he was supposed to fly and then land in the fire. When people are filled with hatred, they get really creative in how to exact punishment on someone. But again, all of that was a statement. When society is so bothered by the nuisance of the truth, you can't just kill Ibrahim and put like some poison in his food, or like Socrates, give him the hemlock and have him drink it and die silently. No, they wanted him to die with a bang in a public spectacle, so that the punishment sends the strongest message to everyone else. We like how we are, and we don't want anyone to change. Right or wrong, truth or not, we don't want to hear it, right? This is when society gets so angry at any change, even if that change means them living a better life. So, classical commentators tell us incredible stories about, how when Ibrahim alayhi salam was literally in flight and the angel of the rain came to him. Imam Qurtubi talks about that. There's so much that I keep omitting, obviously, because there's no time to cover everything. But Imam Qurtubi says that while he was in flight, midair, Khazanul Ma, the angel that keeps rainwater, came to him and he says, إِذَا أَرَدْتَ أَخْمَدْتُ النَّارِ. If it is your wish, I will cause the rain to come down in order to basically put out the fire. And Ibrahim alayhi salam would keep saying, no, that's not what I want. And then the angel of the wind would come to him, Malakul Rih, and you say, if you give me instructions right now, I'll ask the winds to blow, in order for the fire to be put out. And he would say no. The archangel Gabriel, Jibreel alayhi salam, came to him and he says, Ya Ibrahim, alaka haja. Is there anything that you need? And Ibrahim alayhi salam said to him, Amma minka fala. I have no need from you. Amma min Allah, fa'ilmuhu bihali yughnihi an su'ali. As for Allah, His knowledge of my state is sufficient. I don't need to ask anything. Allah knows exactly what I'm going through. Some scholars have attributed weakness to these narrations. I'm just sharing them with you because Imam Qurtubi shared them, and Qurtubi did not necessarily verify the chains of all of that. So some scholars have weakened, those stories. I mean, they're still incredible stories that are designed to show you the strength of faith of Ibrahim alayhi salam, even in the midst of the absolute worst adversity. And that's when relief from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came, and you see it in ayah 69, قُلْنَا يَا نَارُ كُونِي بَرْدًا وَسَلَامًا عَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ. God said, O fire, be cool and a source of inner peace for Ibrahim. Both bard and salam. Be cool and be peaceful, because what if it gets so cool that it becomes so cold, right? Be cool for Ibrahim and be a source of peace for him as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the fire to suspend its primary function, and that is to burn people. There's a few commentators that have actually said this has nothing to do with Ibrahim being thrown in the fire. The Quran actually doesn't say that Ibrahim was physically thrown in the fire, but rather this has to do with a fire on earth that they created for him, a fire of mockery, a fire of attacks, a fire making his life hell on earth, basically. I think that is stretching the words of the Quran a little too much. I would rather just accept the literal nature of these words. But again, I always share with you multiple perspectives so that you have a lot to think about and a lot to read about afterwards. So I'll stop here, inshallah. We're going to pray Salatul Maghrib together, and then we're going to come back to the story of Lut alayhi salam, which gets even more interesting, and we'll continue from there, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan, and we'll pause for 10 minutes. Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we're going to start in about a minute if you guys want to come back to your seats, inshallah. And please don't leave before you enjoy some of the snacks. We have coffee and donuts. It's exactly what you need on a Friday night. All right, you guys, inshallah, we're going to start in just a few seconds. Please come to your seats. All right, you guys, inshallah, Okay, so inshallah, before we get back to Surat Al-Anbiya, I wanted to ask Sister Amy. She's on our seminary team, and she has a couple of announcements that she wants to make about our upcoming classes. So please listen attentively, and we're going to get right back to it. Probably have to use these two microphones together.
Two together? Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Mashallah, and tonight Imam Azeez talked about vision and mission. And part of the vision of Tarbiyah is to educate people towards the goal of serving the communities, towards the goal of being imams. And so think of Tarbiyah University. And so the part of the mission then is to develop a university curriculum, and Tarbiyah has been doing that. And mashallah, we have an extremely good start. We call it the Tarbiyah Seminary. And seminary just means a university level curriculum that's devoted to religious studies. And so Tarbiyah has partnered with IOK, the Institute of Knowledge in Southern California, and we've developed a curriculum whereby students like you and I can take classes in Islam, in Islamic studies. And we've had extremely good success with it so far, and our classes are starting again for the fall semester this coming week. And so I just wanted to let everyone know about it and encourage everyone to go to tarbiyah.org/seminary to learn more about it. Inshallah, Imam Azeez is going to be teaching a class on Thursday nights, and Imam Sharif is going to be co-teaching a class on Saturday, partnering with IOK. And there's also quite a few Arabic classes. And so the current curriculum is designed kind of in 3 tiers. People can just take classes, like I took Arabic 100 this summer just to get the very basics of Arabic. And those are just one-off classes that people can take. Or you can take a curriculum, and we can help you set up a schedule designed toward getting a certificate in Islamic studies or Arabic studies. You can also take a curriculum that's designed to get you an associate's degree in Islamic studies. So alhamdulillah, the program is well on its way. It has a very good foundation. We have a year behind us that was very positive. And before the classes start, I just want to encourage anyone that's interested to go to tarbiyah.org/seminary and review the classes, or if anyone has any questions, I'm certainly available to discuss classes further. So thank you for the time, Imam Azeez.
Thank you so much, Sister Amy. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. She volunteers quite a bit of her time to help us build and organize our seminary program. And alhamdulillah, it's been a tumultuous year. But we've had, alhamdulillah, multiple classes. A lot of students have gone through those classes and received the material. It's very, very difficult to set up a solid educational experience for adults. Sunday school is easy, but to get the adults to actually commit to learning Islam, in depth, studying another language, carving time out of their busy schedules to come here, is definitely a feat of achievement. Let alone getting a degree program or joining the seminary and committing yourself for the next 4 years to become an imam. So again, I'm very grateful for everyone that has gone through the classes, that has registered. When we conceived of the idea of God and philosophy a few months ago, we actually didn't think, I was thinking probably going to be 7 people, registering for the class. I mean, who cares about these concepts, right? Within 2 days, I think we maxed out. 30 students registered. The system all nearly crashed, and now we have over 10 students on the waiting list. And we're trying to find a way to add more space to our library so that we can admit them, inshallah, to the class. So definitely very exciting times, alhamdulillah, for our community. And so again, thank you, Sister Amy, and our amazing seminary team. I don't do anything, by the way, in the seminary, except that I plan to teach one of the classes. So all the credit goes to my brother Imam Sharif and to Sister Amy. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Sister Layla as well, has played an instrumental role in pulling all this off. And ultimately, we also wanted to thank the Institute of Knowledge down in Diamond Bar, California, down south in the Los Angeles area. That is our sister seminary that has been working with us very diligently to help us build our program. Sheikh Nu'man and his team have been an amazing bliss. And we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of this. So, Jazakumullahu khairan. And we get back, inshallah, to this amazing surah about the mission of the prophets and the messengers, and by extension, the mission of scriptures, and that is to bring people out of a state of heedlessness into a state of heedfulness. And we've seen through the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, an incredibly intelligent man, a pioneer, a revolutionary, was trying to change his community, was trying to be as loud as possible in his call in order to wake people up, and in order to get them out of their complacency, to recognize that their actions were not necessarily healthy for them. And such is the fate and plight of reformers throughout history. They see something wrong, they try to change it, they try to alter the course of their society. Sometimes they are successful, most of the time they are not. So Ibrahim alayhi salam goes through that experience, makes an airtight case to his people, appealing to their minds, appealing to their hearts. He basically breaks down. Of course, in today's world, this would have been considered an act of terrorism when you think about it. He went in and he destroyed the idols, broke them to small pieces, and left the biggest one just to make a statement. I'll accuse the big one and see what they say. If they believe that their idols are alive, then they'll at least consider what I'm saying. And if they believe that these idols are dead, then they'll say, are you kidding? This is just an idol. It's a piece of rock. What can it do? And then maybe it'll dawn on them that this whole thing doesn't make any sense. Yet they chose the path of putting out the light of knowledge with the fire of complacency. And to this day, people, societies that reject a great idea, they will light that idea on fire if they could. Okay? They will light it up on fire, the fire of mockery, the fire of attacks, the fire of laws. They will get people in trouble, right? Just because they dare to question an established idea. And we're going to see that even more stark, or in starker terms, we're going to see that in the story of Prophet Lut alayhi salam. Prophet Lot was the nephew of Ibrahim. And the story of Lut alayhi salam, again, is not very different from the story of Ibrahim. It's the same thing. It's an individual, or in his case, a family, that disagrees with the way of their society, so they try to make a change. But that society and its culture has grown so fascist, so totalitarian, that they don't allow any other ideas. And that's the thing about fascism. Fascism doesn't leave you alone. Fascism doesn't say, it's as long as you don't cause me any trouble and you stay at home and you believe in whatever you want to believe, I'm okay. Fascism doesn't do that. That's what liberalism is supposed to do. But when liberalism gradually evolves into or acquires a totalitarian streak, it starts interfering in the very foundations of the human mind. No, I don't want you to believe in anything that I don't want you to believe. The Nazis did not just want society to tolerate them and to accept them. They wanted society to believe in what they believed in, to follow what they follow, to engage in what they engage in. Right? Not only that they didn't want people to rebel or to oppose what they did, they wanted people to embrace it fully and 100% to the utmost. Okay, so liberalism by definition is supposed to be of the attitude of, what, it's okay. You believe in whatever you want to believe. You accept whatever you want to accept. You should be 100% free to choose. And you should never be punished for those choices, right? That's what liberalism is about. But gradually, liberalism, degrades itself into a form of totalitarianism that it starts literally requiring you to believe in something else. Okay? And we see that, unfortunately, happening in America. And I can't think of a more powerful story to demonstrate that degradation of ideas than the story of Lut alayhi salam. You have a prophet and his family, they mind their own business, they live in their own house. Their society is riddled with this sickness, right? And what can he do? He's just one man with his daughters. Even his wife was against him. And I'll show you why his wife was against him, right? There's a great reason for that. He preaches sometimes, he gets busy with his business sometimes. He's not a nuisance. They can just say no. If that is a liberal society, they would say, you know what, Lut, lakum dinukum waliya din. You have your way, we have our way. We've heard you, we hear you out, but we're not interested in following you. Okay? No, that society was not like this. That society was bothered by the very existence of someone that espouses a different view, like Lut alayhi salam. They did not want that. They were bothered by his mere existence, right? So they did everything in their capacity to convert Lut into their way. This is, again, when a culture becomes so imposing, becomes so tyrannical, becomes so totalitarian that it requires every member of that culture to espouse or follow, embrace the same exact views. What are the problems, the illnesses, the ailments in the city of Sodom, in the city of Lut alayhi salam, that required his attention? What are the problems in his society? Anyone wants to guess? Of course, that's the easiest answer, that you'll say homosexuality. Sure. The very first ailment that he has to deal with was the prevalence of homosexual behavior in his own community. Okay? And the Quran reflects that in the ayat, أَتَأْتُونَ الرِّجَالَ شَهْوَةً مِّن دُونِ النِّسَاءِ. You are attracted to men instead of being attracted to women. Like, what is wrong with you? Right? Is the divine call here. But that is the least of his problems. If people practice homosexual behavior in their own homes, and they don't bother anyone else, and they don't go out in the world carrying homosexuality as a matter of identity, as a stripe on their sleeves, it would have been okay. I mean, people commit sins all the time. I'm not saying it would have been okay. I'm just saying it would be a problem, but a manageable problem. My neighbors are not Muslim. And my neighbors, one of my neighbors is not married. He lives with this woman. He's been living with this woman for 25 years. Committed, devout to each other, but they're not devoted to each other, but they're not married. Okay? I can say that my neighbor commits zina, right? I could say that. But I mean, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect my kids. It doesn't affect my family. Islamically, his behavior is not accepted to me, but he's not my responsibility. Your neighbor drinks alcohol. Her neighbor, goes to the casino to gamble. Sin does exist in society, including homosexuality. This is something that people do in the privacy of their homes. It's haram, it's wrong, it's against the way that God wanted us to live, right? But it is one thing to practice this in your own home, and it becomes a completely different problem when it becomes what? When it becomes public, right? And so the second problem here that Lut alayhi salam had to deal with is the cultural practices, how homosexuality now reflects itself on the culture of his own society. It's something that is being practiced publicly. إِنَّكُمْ لَتَأْتُونَ فِي نَادِيكُمُ الْمُنْكَرِ. You're not just practicing it at home, you are practicing it in your community hall. You're practicing in your social club. You're talking about it, you're promoting it, you are engaging everyone in that sin that should have remained private in the privacy of it. So on the one hand, he has to deal with homosexuality as a sin like all the other sins. But what is worse is that he has to deal with it as a cultural expression, as a public sin that is now being committed by other people, right? It's the public practices of it. Now, what is the third problem that he had to deal with? Stemming from, this sort of public lust for homosexual behavior. Remember? What happened when the angels of destruction came to his house? What happened? When his people saw those men, those angels that looked like men, what did they do? They came into his house, attacking his house in order to do what? In order to kidnap those men and rape them. Okay? So we basically evolve, or in this case, devolve, from a mere sinful behavior into the public practice of that sinful behavior into sexual violence. I know that it's easy for us to say, yes, the problem of Sodom was homosexuality. It's a lot more complicated than that. This is what he had to deal with. He had to deal with the sinful behavior. He had to deal with the public practice of this sinful behavior, and then with the sexual violence that comes out of all that. Okay? But there is a fourth problem that he has to deal with. What is that fourth problem? The fourth problem is that homosexuality became the culture of his community. So even non-homosexuals are now in support of it. And what is the stark example of that support? His wife. His wife. His wife is a woman. There is no record that she was a member of the LGBTQ community or anything like that, right? She's not lesbian, right? She had no interest in that. She's married. She's married. Her husband is Lut himself, right? Yet, she still favors the culture of her people. And she still thinks that Lut, her husband, is wrong for asking them to stop. She has no skin in that game except that she's associated with her own people. I mean, if she was gay herself, we would at least understand why she fights for something like that. But she wasn't. But she completely adopted that as her own culture. This is my way of life, even if I don't practice it myself. And to this day, we see people who are not members of the LGBTQ community, yet they are their biggest advocates. Why? Because they've adopted that ethos as their own culture. And again, I believe that homosexuality is a sin. I believe that homosexuality is wrong. I believe that the LGBTQ ethos is not how God wants us to live. But if this is something that you practice, behind the fence of your backyard in the privacy of your home, it's none of my business. I will preach against it in a spiritual sense, but I will never advocate violence or anything like that. It's a spiritual sin that God will punish. right? Nothing else it concerns me beyond that. But it definitely concerns me when this becomes the culture of my society. Because now I am not just being expected to tolerate something and to be like, you know what, I'm Muslim, these are not my values, and I know that this is absolutely wrong, but hey, you know, we live in a democratic society, and I have to accept that some citizens will practice things that I disagree with. That is the essence of a democracy. We're all okay with that. But it doesn't stop there anymore, does it? You are now being not only expected to tolerate and accept, you're expected to celebrate it. You are expected, like Lut and his family, to think that this is right and okay. In fact, you know, and I don't want to get, you know, a little upset about this, because sometimes I do, you know, and I don't think that we should get upset about it. I think that our hearts should, you know, definitely we should feel the fire, because I think that people who follow the LGBTQ ethos in America or in the West today, honestly, are victims in their own right. But that's a subject of a different conversation that we might have, right? And so I don't want us to get angry about these things. We still have to be, you know, insightful, and we have to be compassionate as we approach it. But I think that if you follow the trend now in the movies, in the songs, in the music videos, Netflix, whatever, I'm coming to a realization that it is almost being suggested that being homosexual or being in the LGBTQ is not only equal to heterosexuality, but better and cooler and smarter and more adventurous. People are now being asked to act like this. They are being required to, and if you're not LGBTQ, at least you need to act like them. Cinderella, this timeless story has now been redone by Amazon, right? And they've inserted openly gay characters in the movie, right? There's a drag queen character in the movie. I mean, Cinderella, the story that the kids naturally lower their guards and they immediately just enjoy right away, has now been injected with the same thing. Again, this is not a matter of, hey, we should just be accepting of each other's and just tolerate, you know, this is the tolerance of a pluralistic society. No. Just like the society of Lut alayhi salam, the Western world now demands not only acceptance, demands celebration. They want you as heterosexual males or females to think that being gay is better and cooler. Man, I wish I was gay. It has come to that point. And that is the part that really, really bothers me the most. And I think it's probably what bothered Lut alayhi salam the most. If it was just a matter of sin that remained at home, he would have dealt with it. All the prophets had to deal with sins, one way or the other. In fact, every single prophet did. Shu'aib alayhi salam had to deal with the prevalent sin in his society where people used to tamper with the scales and cheat in their business transactions. Every society has its ailment, and the prophets came to fix those things. But in his case, they were angry at him because he's not accepting them. Okay, guys, why do I have to accept you? You know, why do I have to think you're okay? You know, I can't say that your way of life is against my way of life. How could you say that? You're a homophobe. How could you say that? What is wrong with me? And now I'm on the defensive, and I have to provide explanations, right? It's the most disturbing thing. And of course, what ends up happening sometimes is that this fire comes to our doorsteps. Every month now, a Muslim family would come to me and say, you know, my daughter is confused about her sexuality. Or, you know, my son thinks he's a girl. It's crazy, right? This is really becoming scary. It's okay, I think, for some boys to feel a little effeminate. It's okay for some girls to feel somehow masculine. All that is okay. It's a continuum. But there's got to be a line at the end of the day. We have been created in this binary fashion. Whether you believe in God or you're an atheist that believes in evolution, we've always been binary. It's always been male and female. Our DNA is binary. right? Our biology is binary, our reproductive system is binary, right? These are all cultural evolutions that are happening in the last 25 years, right? And so the fire reached his doorstep as well. What happened to his own family? His wife embraced these things. His wife embraced that same exact thing. She was not gay herself, but she embraced it as a culture, as a cultural association. Right? So as we feel that fire reaching our doorsteps, Lut alayhi salam, felt the same way, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about his wife in another location in the Quran. وَلَا يَلْتَفِتْ مِنْكُمْ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا امْرَأَتَكَ إِنَّهُ مُصِيبُهَا مَا أَصَابَهُم. When Allah is about to save them from the punishment, He says, all of you are going to be saved except your wife. She will have to taste the same punishment, as her people. All of these four ailments that happen in the society of Lut alayhi salam are actually collectively described under one word in ayah number 74. It's the words of the Quran are so comprehensive. Like if you look at ayah number 74, وَلُوطًا آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْقَرْيَةِ الَّتِي كَانَتْ تَعْمَلُ الْخَبَائِثِ. Lut, we have entrusted him with sound judgment and knowledge of right and wrong, and saved him from that community which was given to deeds of abomination. Al-Khaba'ith, the word khabath. Al-Khaba'ith is the plural of that, right? So all these four things that I mentioned to you, the homosexuality as a sin practiced privately, homosexuality as a sin, practiced publicly, and people being proud and taking it as their identity. I've never understood how anyone uses their own sexuality as their identity, like a human being that reduces themselves. All they are, their love for sports and the arts and their education and their history and their race and their color and everything that they are, all of it is vaporized, and that person is reduced to what type of sex they want to have. Never made any sense to me. Because you know what? I am a lot more than just a heterosexual male. I refuse to be characterized as a heterosexual male, because I am a lot more than my sexuality. Okay? But somehow there are some people that are okay with this, reductionist mentality, right? So homosexuality as a sin, homosexuality as being practiced in public and it's becoming an identity, sexual violence that may ensue, and the LGBTQ ethos becoming the culture of the land and becoming the accepted norm that everyone aspires to become. Again, this is characterized as al-khaba'ith in ayah number 74. And then it follows as a brief mention of Nuh alayhi salam, Prophet Noah, ayah number 76. And Allah says, وَنُوحًا إِذْ نَادَى مِنْ قَبْلِ. And remember Noah, when he called out unto his people. Again, these prophets lost their voice trying to wake their people up. Wake up from your ghafla. Come back to a heedful state. Pay attention, okay? And then ayah number 78, man, takes us on this incredible journey describing two particular prophets with very unique qualities, right? Ayah number 78. Who are those prophets? Dawood wa Sulaiman, David and Solomon. What is unique about Dawood and Sulaiman compared to all the other prophets? They were kings. They were kings. Which means that the tactics that the ordinary person like you and I, or even ordinary prophets in their attempt to wake their people up and make them heedful, must be different from the tactics that a prophet king would use. They have more power, they have more resources, they have better access than the rest of us. Indeed, the type of resources that King Solomon had compared to, let's say, Noah are very, very different, right? So the ayah here describes an event. Ayah number 78 describes an event. And in that event, a man, and by the way, this story is so common. It was commonly cited in pre-Islamic Arabia, even in the days of Jahiliyyah. The Arabs before Islam used to cite this story. And all the Prophet's companions cited that story, and it's very, very common. قصة متواترة. There's so many chains for that story across the board that it is taken very, very seriously. And in that story, it basically says that a farmer who used to own a garden came to Dawood alayhi salam in order to complain about somebody else, about this goat herder, this shepherd that basically owned a flock. And at night, the shepherd fell asleep, and the flock of his goats and sheep, marched into the garden and literally ate everything. They ate the garden down to nothingness. And then the man woke up in the morning, he realized that his garden is blown into smithereens. He gets extremely angry, and he goes to Dawood alayhi salam in order to, seek his judgment. So Dawood asked the shepherd, did that actually happen? And the shepherd, yes, it was a mistake. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen. But yes, my sheep and goats ate this man's crop. So Dawood alayhi salam's decree was that the entire herd of goats and sheep is going to move to the landowner as a punishment for the shepherd who basically allowed this to happen, even if it was a mistake. As a punishment, we're just going to take the ownership of all of this, and we transfer the deed of all these animals, of the livestock, basically to the farmer, the owner of the garden. Who heard about this? Sulaiman. And Sulaiman, according to the story, was young here. He was not a prophet yet. He was a young man. He was the crown prince. But remember, who was the teacher of Sulaiman? Who was the teacher of Sulaiman? Dawood was his father. But his father hired a teacher. Who was Sulaiman's teacher? Luqman, you guys. Luqman al-Hakim. Luqman the wise, the great African sage, was the mentor of Sulaiman alayhi salam, right? Anyway, that's another long story. We don't have time to cover. And so Sulaiman is smart. He's intelligent. He is being prepared to become a prophet. He's a great guy, a real insightful guy, and he had the most intelligent and wisest mentors on earth. So when Sulaiman heard about this, he goes to his dad and he says, "Dad, listen. Your punishment is disproportionate to the crime. Because if the land is the asset, the crops are the profit. And if the livestock is the asset, the milk and the wool and all of that is the profit. So basically, this man's profit was destroyed, but then you took the asset from the other man." Do I repeat this, or are you guys following me here? You're following me, right? You punished this man who basically his flock destroyed not the asset, but destroyed the profits. It just destroyed the crop, but the land is still there. Now you took all of his livestock. So Dawood said, "Okay, so what are you suggesting?" He says, "Well, in order for the punishment to be commensurate to the crime or to the misdemeanor in this particular situation, you need to, because what was damaged here was the crop, what was damaged was the profits, then you need to basically take the profits, not the asset from the other guy." So he said, "Okay, what do we do?" He says, "Well, okay, here's what I'm suggesting. You give this barren land that was destroyed, you give it to the shepherd, and you ask the shepherd to farm that land until all the crop blossoms again. And then you give the livestock, the animals of the shepherd, to the owner of the land to benefit from the milk and to benefit from all the newborn calves and to benefit from the wool and all of that, on his own. And once the crop has grown, you swap again. So this guy gets his animals back, and then the farmer gets his garden." And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَفَهَّمْنَاهَ سُلَيْمَانَ. We have made it clear to Sulaiman alayhi salam. So the father, the king, adjudicates a matter, he decrees something, and his son comes and he questions him. And all of that is mentioned in ayat 78 and 79. I look at this story and I keep saying to myself, what was happening here? is this really just Dawood and Sulaiman disagrees on the manner of administering justice, but they still agree on justice as a common denominator? They just disagreed on the methodology? Or is there more to it than this? Okay? And it always helps when we think of the theme of the surah. This is Surat Al-Anbiya. It's about waking people up. It's about sending a message. It's about being creative. It's about, heedfulness. Okay? These are two prophet kings. They're great in their own right, but they are trying to teach their community something. I feel that essentially, and you can disagree with me on this, but essentially I feel that Sulaiman alayhi salam is following in the footsteps of Ibrahim. He sees something and he realizes that direct preaching may not work. So I need to come up with a more public display, a more public demonstration. I'm not saying that this was an act between Dawood and Sulaiman. I'm not saying that it was an act. I am saying that Sulaiman probably knew that his father's decree was less optimal. But he let it play out so that he comes back and he goes and he questions his father, because through that dialogue, he's sending a message to his people, a wake-up call to his people. What is it that the people of Israel benefit from, or what is it that they learn from this entire conversation? Number one is the absolute necessity of justice. There's no such thing as just let it go. Justice needs to be delivered, right? But more important than just the deliverance of justice is that justice needs to be commensurate with the crime. You cannot overpunish, okay? So now the Hebrews are watching this. Oh my God, look at the son is disagreeing with his dad. Now, man, this is like tabloid stuff right there. Everyone is focused now. Everyone wants to know these celebrities and what they're doing. So you have two celebrities that are actually taking advantage of their platforms to educate their community. So Sulaiman alayhi salam comes back. He knows that his father's judgment, is probably not the most sound at this point, but he doesn't want to second guess his father. So he let him make his decision, and then he comes back to him. The entire community is now watching what's going on. Number one, justice must be served. Number two, justice needs to be proportionate to the magnitude of the misdemeanor. Number three, there needs to be a distinction between involuntary and voluntary crimes. The man did not necessarily intend for his livestock to destroy the other man's crop. So this is like the difference between murder, first degree murder, second degree murder, manslaughter, stuff like that. Premeditated murder versus, a crime of passion, and all these different distinctions in today's laws. Justice is not just one blanket sweeping decision. Justice is nuanced. Justice has to be insightful, right? Just imagine the truckload of lessons that people are learning, just watching this reality TV, right? In the kingdom of Israel, right? That there is a distinction between voluntary and involuntary misdemeanors. To show that's number four. To show that honest people, including family members, can and should and must disagree with each other when it comes to the deliverance of justice. You hear it all the time. We're one family. We should always appear to be tight. We should always appear to be together. We should never let people see our dirty laundry. We should never see people, let people see us disagree. Do you agree with this philosophy? I don't agree with that philosophy. I actually think it's healthy. It's healthy for brothers and sisters and sons and daughters and fathers and their kids and parents and their kids to disagree in a healthy way, even if it's public. Because it shows that the truth matters to us. We're not going to cover up for each other. Oh, Dawood is my dad, and even though I think his decision is wrong, I'm not going to say anything. Because in front of the community, we need to appear tight and strong and, standing, within the same range. No, not necessarily true. It is actually healthier for the Hebrews to see that even father and son may have a disagreement, but their intention is the deliverance of justice ultimately. In any other setting, the father and son would have said, you know what? Can we afford for the people of Israel to see us like disagreeing? What if they use that disagreement against us and start, sowing the seeds of strife and driving wedges between us? these are the simplistic ideas that are determined by culture. But justice matters and is worth the sacrifice, right? Number 5, that minor offenses should not be punished for life. You should not have to lose your entire livestock and be poor because of one mistake that you've made. You will have to struggle with that punishment for an assigned period of time, but then after that, life needs to go back to normal. Justice is also about people being forgiven after they have been redeemed. Okay? After retribution has been administered, and done, everything is completed, okay, it's time for me to go back and live a good life and learn from those lessons. So this was the wake-up call for the Hebrews. This is Sulaiman alayhi salam, going through this entire exercise in order to again bring people out of their heedlessness into a state of heedfulness. One thing here, that I'm going to comment on very quickly. 79 talks about Dawood's ability. He used to sing and use beautiful instruments to inspire people to love God. With the same token, I would actually say that music today is one of the most effective instruments of heedlessness. You see some of these teenagers like in a different world, with their headphones, listening to their filthy music, objectification of women, violent behavior, profanity. The lyrics are horrific. Oh no, I'm just enjoying the tunes. I like the beat. It's not good enough. That's not a good enough answer. If you're going to listen to music, it needs to be something beautiful and inspiring, something that, and I'm not even talking about the whole music is halal or haram. I have made that determination years and years ago, and I've published videos about it. And you can go back to those videos. The average, the moderate consumption of clean music is halal in my judgment, and I'm very, very upfront about that. I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about the content. I am talking about music. Instead of being an instrument that serves you, you are now at its service. It becomes your God. It's the same thing that I was talking about earlier. That for some people, music is God. That's what they worship. That's what they listen to every single day. Their serotonin levels are low unless they listen to some music. They can't function. It's like coffee. If you are way too dependent on coffee every single day, then coffee is your God. That's the idea. Music today, in today's world, is the primary source of that heedlessness, of this ghafla. Okay? But Dawood alayhi salam, he used to sing, and he used to use instruments, and he used to make the trees and the mountains, rise and elevate in their connection with God because of the beauty of his words and the power of his voice. But something else that Dawood alayhi salam used to do that was an incredible innovation for his time is ayah number 80, وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ صَنْعَةَ لَبُوسٍ لَكُمْ. All the shields of war used to be just one plate, one piece that was very heavy, very cumbersome. Try putting like this piece of metal that surrounds your chest or surrounds your, the Romans used to have, these basically pieces of this shield that clips on the side. So you wear it like this, and then it clips on the side from here. So it protects your front and your back. And of course it would have, your abs and everything so that, you look scary to the enemy, right? But that's not the easiest thing to wear. It's extremely heavy and it's not malleable. So you're trying to move and you're literally fighting in battle, and it becomes a hindrance. Dawood alayhi salam invented this different type of shield that is actually made of small, tiny little links, right? And so this is like a chain mail type of vest. If you remember from the Lord of the Rings, remember Frodo's vest, the vest of Mithril, whatever in the movie, that was the type. So it's tiny little chains that are connected to each other. So it's very, very strong and durable, but it's also very flexible. Okay, that was the shield, the art of shield making that Dawood alayhi salam introduced to the world. And then after that, and I'm about to finish here, the ayat from there onwards until 92, where I finish, make a brief mention of the following prophets: Ayyub alayhi salam, Job, Ismail alayhi salam, Ibrahim's other son. Idris, who many commentators say that he was Osiris, the god of Egypt, and after he died, they made him into this legend, and the legend became a false god eventually. Dhul Kifl, and some people say that he was the son of Ayub alayhi salam, and some say that he is Ezekiel, Hizqiyal, the prophet in the Bible. Yunus alayhi salam, Jonah, Zachariah, and Maryam, the mother of Jesus, Mary. And I want to end with ayah number 92. So there's brief mention of all these prophets in one or two ayat, next to each other or right after each other. But 92 is where I wanted to end. إن هذه أمتكم أمة واحدة وأنا ربكم فاعبدوا. Verily, this community of yours is one single community, and I am your Lord. Worship then me alone. I can't think of any other civilization that had an onset. Every other civilization is usually an evolution that takes time, right? I mean, you think of the Greeks and how they evolved from the Orphic tradition. You think of the Romans and how they kind of evolved from Greek culture, very gradually. You even think of the modern American civilization and how it evolved from, the British Empire. All these civilizations across history, they kind of give to each other, they lend to each other. It's a very gradual process that, historians always have a hard time deciding on a beginning. What is the beginning point? Like you can't really say that the Roman Empire or Roman civilization started, on this day, in that year. So it's impossible to find out the exact markers that mark the beginning and the end of civilizations. It's all a very, very gradual process. The only exception to that is the Islamic civilization. There is an absolute beginning to the Islamic civilization, and that is the moment when the Prophet Muhammad was in the cave and he encountered Jibreel alayhi salam for the first time. Prior to that moment, there is no Islamic civilization. Right after that moment, there is an Islamic civilization. There is a clear onset to Islamic civilization, right? But then again, with the same token, there is no other civilization where it's not based on race, it's not based on a region, it's not based on a shared language. The Romans, after all, were in what today would be Rome, and then they expanded into the world from there. Every other, territory was a province of Rome. The Greeks, the same thing. They originated from there. The Greek people are the white Greeks, of Europe, and so forth. The Islamic civilization is very different because every person and any person that accepts Islam is now automatically subsumed in that civilization. It doesn't matter your race or your language or where on earth you live. If you're born on Mars or born on this planet, it doesn't matter. The minute you profess Islam, you have automatically now brought yourself to belong to the Islamic civilization. That is a conscious personal choice. A black man that lived in Africa could have never become Greek. You cannot possibly belong to the Greek civilization. You may become a subject of the Greek Empire, but you will never become Greek in the strict sense of the word, right? But you can become Muslim. It doesn't matter, male, female, from which part of the earth or color or race or which language you speak. You become Muslim by choice. You belong to this ummah, this one nation, by choice. Hence the Quranic characterization here, إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. Yours is one nation. Cherish that. Celebrate that. Find value and honor and dignity in the fact that you travel to Malaysia, you travel to Brunei, you travel to New Zealand, you travel to Alaska, you go to Brazil, to Sao Paulo, anywhere on earth, you travel to that, you go to the local mosque, they're going to pray the same exact way, they're going to recite from the same book, they're going to have Jummah on Fridays, maybe the way that the Imam delivers is different, but the content is always the same. And it doesn't matter who you are, they'll treat you as a brother or a sister, right? There is so much to value and cherish in that, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase our knowledge of the Quran and to inspire us to be better with the knowledge of the Quran. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to unify our community and our ummah, and I ask Allah to gather us in the highest level of Jannah. Allahumma ameen. I can take some questions, inshallah, if you guys have any. Jazakumullahu khairan. Any questions tonight? Please, brother. The brother is asking a bit about the linguistic difference between fahisha and khaba'ith or khabath. And so the word fahisha in general means a sin that offends the mind and offends the heart so much. So I would say that, you know, homosexuality would be considered a fahisha as well. Khaba'ith is when that sin is basically becomes, through a process of social engineering, it becomes a cultural phenomenon. And now demands more of people than practicing it or accepting it. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Going once? Yes.
Question about the incident about the event about Prophet Ibrahim being thrown into a fire. And the idea we talk about is the preservation of the customs or the rules. And what we see today is more of a secular movement or secular being taken at the government level and imposing themselves on the religious people, especially Muslims. And I take the case of France, for example. And I believe it's not imposing it because they want to keep the thing. There's an economic dimension to it. They can make money. They're making money of the thing. They're making money of music. They're making money of movies. They're making money of the thing. And they want to continue imposing that because there's a certain number of people who benefit from that by keeping the other guys oppressed and consuming that kind of product, which is filthy product.
And filth does sell a lot. Mm-hmm.
So it's not just customs only, but there's an economic dimension to it.
This is definitely a fair point. The brother is talking about the economic dimension of all of this, and that is sometimes filth is packaged into a product because it sells a lot. And I agree with you in the sense that it's not only possible, it's probably true that those who sell that product are only interested in the financial gain. But if we examine wider society, and I think that, you know, people in America today, you know, the young people that espouse these extreme liberal views, they do that actually out of like a good intention, like with a good heart. They feel like we don't want to see anyone being oppressed. We want people to live the way that makes them happy. I may disagree with it, but I just want them to be who they want to be, and it's not my business to tell them, you know, what they want. And I think that the mistake that they make is that they fail to realize that at the end of the day, there has to be some value that needs to be taught. And if everything is relative, this you know, sort of like moral relativism, you cannot really decide on anything. You cannot draw any lines. You cannot make any determinations, because anything goes, including the very ideas that oppose mine. So you're supposed to accept everything, and if you accept everything, you should also accept the possible demise of your own ideas, which is the one thing I think that liberalism, this is where liberalism philosophically fails, because it bears within its own premises the very seed of its destruction. On the other hand, I also feel like, you know, a lot of liberals in this country are definitely honest, definitely sincere, They ignore the philosophical contradiction and inconsistency because they're scared of the alternative. And the alternative is this self-serving, totalitarian brand of conservatism in America today. You know, the right is just as insane. So people don't know what to do. So, you know what? I disagree with the right, I disagree with the left, and might as well vote liberal because I'm a minority and, you know, they're going to leave me alone. Okay? Well, not anymore. We're realizing that no one is leaving you alone anymore. Here's what I always say. I think that America needs reasonable conservatives. America needs people who are insightful conservatives. We don't have that many of those anymore. You know, conservatives cry Trumpism now. They're oozing with radical right ideas. And that is it's not working. And so the country keeps polarizing and people keep moving to the extremes of the continuum, and we are all, you know, in disservice because of this. I feel like a different path needs to arise, and that is conservative people that are reasonable, that are insightful, they're not interested in the annihilation of everybody else that is not like them, you know, that don't look down upon anyone that is not white and Christian and male. And maybe that day will come sooner than later, but and I hope that the Muslim community will be a part of that solution. Because I think our philosophy has the right ingredients. It's just, it needs to find its way into the wider public discourse. Any other questions? Yes?
I always wonder if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded the Anbiya or Rusul according to the struggle.
Reward them, you said?
No, not reward them, you know, like now what the level in Jannah, are they all in the same level?
Uh-huh.
Or, you know, depending on they have been through the struggles they have been through, or they are in different.
So the sister is asking about the ranks of the prophets. You know, are they all on the same rank on the Day of Judgment, or they will occupy a higher rank depending on their struggles? Well, there's ulul azmi min ar-rusul. There's the prophets of strong resolve, and those are basically the bearers of the great scriptures, right? And so you have Nuh, Ibrahim, Musa, Isa, and Muhammad, right? Those are the five that have the great scriptures, and therefore they are definitely favored in the sight of God. But ultimately, with all تلك الرسل فضلنا بعضهم على بعض. That's the meaning of it. That we favored some prophets over the others because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favored the five over the rest of them. But ultimately, there is no discrimination between the prophets. لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rest of them, they will be, you know, standing on the same rank on the Day of Judgment. So there's the five, and then there's basically everyone else. Any other questions? Yes.
Reading the stories of or the lives of these great kings such as Pharaohs, Nimrod, or Caesar. One thing that comes to me as a comment is, to me, they don't look to be that big of a party at all, because it's the kings before them that helped build a church or helped build a religious elite that was too weak in intelligentsia, that could not fathom the fact that there could be one God, or they were too arrogant to give power to the prophet of their times. So the idea, with this idea is somehow relevant to the Muslim countries in these times. We think about the theocracy that kind of helps the king in power, and the king that keeps the theocracy in power. So
They all work in unison.
yes.
You know, both political power and religious establishments. You know, in fact, you know, in today's age, I would add wealth as the third component here. So using political power, using religion, and using wealth to exercise power and authority. You know, I think that explains a lot about what's happening in America when you actually think about it. It is also true, however, that there are historical instances in which the church was not necessarily in harmony with political power. I mean, you look at the Roman Empire, especially after the rise of Christianity, Constantine onwards, and there was not only occasional, I mean, quite frequent friction between the Catholic establishment, the Pope as a representative of God or the manager of divine affairs, and the king who basically manages mundane worldly affairs. And I think that struggle was ultimately adjudicated when political power was usurped by the church. So you know what? This is too much work. Let's just make the king subject to the church. And that went on for centuries. And so a subjugated church always works to the best interest of those who are in power. That is 100% true. But a church that is too powerful will also subjugate political power to its own will, and it just becomes a self-serving process that benefits the Pope and that benefits the priests. And again, the world has seen tremendous amount of pain from a corrupt Catholic Church over the centuries. The Dark Ages lasted for like 1,000 years. It's crazy, right? And so your point is definitely valid. And I think the role of civil society, the role of individual citizens, is to always make sure that those three institutions are not so in bed with each other. They're not so tight with each other. So that's that. Any other questions? All right, you guys. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Inshallah, we'll pray Isha at 9, so that's in a couple of minutes. So if you guys want to get ready, please do so. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.